What would you think the hardest stunt is?
Tandem ramps or Roman skis where you have two or three cars side by side doing the ramps.
That's not easy?
Well, the middle car is held on the ramps by the one on each side. They would move until their running boards touched. They would practically hold that middle car in line. Almost anything was more dangerous than the rollover. The truck jump was probably the most dangerous stunt of all.
Why?
Well, because you were going fast and you were approaching that truck, which isn't going to move, maybe 60 miles an hour. And the way we used to do the truck jump, we'd park the truck at right angles to the ramp, flatbed truck. We'd put a 1-inch board in the middle of the truck bed. The idea was for the car to jump over the truck, knock that board off, but not actually hit the truck. And that took a little precision, but it could be done. Lynch could also tip a car over on its side, rip the door handles off, and get the car back on the wheels. Not everyone could do that either.
He'd be trying to?
Well, yeah, he'd bet money on it.
That he could rip them off?
Yeah. And he won better than 3 out of 5.
They liked to bet, did they?
Oh, those guys bet on anything. 2 birds sitting on a wire, they bet which one would fly first.
They all seemed like they were real nice guys.
They were a lot of fun. I liked them.
And that for all the hell they raised, they were...
Well, they never hurt anybody. They just had fun. Like when they practically broke up that old ladies convention, the WCTU, with their mannequin and their empty bottles and all that stuff. They didn't hurt anybody, but they sure had the place in an uproar.
Were they scared of anything?
The microphone. They didn't like the mic.
How do you mean?
They didn't want to talk on it. You could get them on the radio where they were in a studio and nobody around. You could do an interview with them, but you couldn't get them up on that platform to work.
Last night you were telling me how, when we were talking about how they all seemed like real nice guys, you mentioned to me that they were fearless in a way.
Well, they were not afraid of what scared the ordinary person. And the reason they didn't fear it's because they understood it. Like a rollover, they knew what was going to happen. They knew how to do it. They knew they weren't going to get hurt. The ordinary guy's scared to death of a rollover. But they didn't fear that sort of thing because they understood it. You're born, Dale, with only 2 fears. The fear of a loud noise and the fear of falling. Every other fear you have is acquired. If you don't acquire them, you don't have them.
Could you tell me again, just so I have it clean on tape, how they weren't afraid of anything?
Well, they weren't afraid of any ordinary thing that most people would be afraid of, because most of the things that people were afraid of, they understood, like rollovers, crashes, and all that. They knew what happened and how to avoid being hurt, so it didn't worry them. They weren't afraid. But that was the only difference between them and any other person. They knew how to build a board wall to go through. They knew how to hit it, how fast to be going, how to handle everything, and so they didn't fear it. You wouldn't be afraid of it either if you had the same knowledge. They could take any good driver with fast reflexes and who had brains enough to follow orders, and they could make a stunt driver out of him in 3 weeks or less.
They just have to make sure he was confident and that he knew what was going to happen.
Well, you had to instruct him, you had to teach him, and he had to be the kind of a guy that could keep his hair on if something happened, keep thinking.
Jim's got the book here.
Mom says help yourself to those, but there's a lot of family stuff in there too. So.
Okay. Does she want me to just pick out what I
Yeah.
can use and leave the rest? Okay. I would prefer that as well.
Okay. I'm gonna go weed the garden.
Okay, Jim.
There's a picture here about blowing up a dummy microphone.
Yeah, clown act. They put a dynamite detonator in the mic, which was a dime store spittoon.
Who's Bus?
Who?
There's a picture here of 3 guys that says Red, Bus, and J.V. Durham. Boss.
Well, Durham was a mechanic for Winkley's show. And there's one sort of a heavy-set kind of blonde guy.
Yeah, standing in the middle in front of the van. He's tall, he's smoking a cigarette. Kind of, yeah, got blonde, got kind of a wave in the front of his hair.
Yeah, that was, he was a driver for Winkley.
Was his name Buzz?
That was his nickname.
What was it?
I don't know, I wasn't with Winkley.
Oh, I just wanted you to say it so I could use it. Oh, you weren't with Winkley, okay. Well, they're standing in front of a Jimmy Lynch truck.
Well, as soon as Lynch bought him, they painted him Jimmy Lynch. See, Lynch had 3 shows, or 3 units running at one time, actually 4. There was one at the New York World's Fair that never left there. And then there was one along the Ohio River Valley and in that area, Ohio, Kentucky, and so on. There was another one a little farther west, and then one west of the Mississippi that went through Kansas, Nebraska, and so on. And so some of those towns, especially the far west ones, were small. And when Lynch bought Winkley's show, they were assigned to Winkley's unit. And so you had the Jimmy Lynch show going in towns that the rest of us had never been in, didn't know anything about. We used to be going down the road, and we would encounter a Jimmy Lynch car going the other way. We'd blow the horn and wave, we didn't even know who it was. They could have been stealing the car for all we knew, because there were that many of them around and they were that busy. We were showing practically every day somewhere. We hired a new man one time in Kansas, and he got lost from the rest of the group, and he didn't know the route. And he drove all over 2 or 3 states trying to find us, because he was running from one unit to the other, and he had the wrong one every time. He never did find us, and he used all his money, and he hawked his watch, and he sold the spare tire to get gas. He had a hell of a time till he got back with us. We didn't know where he was. He didn't know where we were.
He must have been on the road a while.
He was.
Here's a picture of your 660 watt power plant.
Oh yeah, that was a pin core. The best one was Dave Owen.
I'm just gonna look at my notebook. I made a note last night. A couple things I wanted to ask you about. Oh yeah, well, tell me a bit about the head-on speeds. How they figured out.
Well, if two cars hit each other head on, the combined speed of the car would equal one car hitting a brick wall, something immovable. In other words, if each car were going 25 miles an hour, you had a 50-mile-an-hour impact in each car. The same as if you drove one car at 50 miles an hour into a wall.
What would happen to the slower guy
To what?
if one guy was going a bit slower?
He got run over. If one guy was going 25 miles an hour, another guy was going 30, the guy going 30 miles an hour practically ran over the slow one. And it didn't make a whole lot of difference about the weight of the car. Everybody thinks it does, but it doesn't. It's the momentum that counts.
So when the boys figured this out, what happened?
Well, then when the fellows found out about it, naturally, each guy wanted to be going faster, protect his own neck, so they began hunching. They became good at judging speed, and they would ignore the flag. They wouldn't match the control they were given. And they hit so hard it was dangerous to everyone, including the spectators, because pieces flew further. So the result was they abandoned the head-on crash. They just quit doing it.
Before somebody got killed.
Yeah.
So at one point you had you worked that first season with Teeter, and then headed home.
And then I went out with Lynch when he started.
How did he get in touch with you?
Well, the other guys in the show all knew me. They knew I lived in Mansfield, and they got on the phone and called me.
Did Jimmy call you?
Not at first, one of the guys did. I don't remember which one. But then Jim came to Mansfield, and we all met down at the hotel. They actually set the show up here in Mansfield.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think Lynch put on his first show in Akron, or at least in that neighborhood. I don't remember for sure. But we showed in all the towns around that area to begin with.
What year did he start?
35 when he had his first show. We showed Akron, Canton, Youngstown, Canfield, that sort of thing.
Jimmy,
They called it Hell Drivers. They called it Jimmy Lynch Hell Drivers.
and did he?
But Jim didn't do the stunts in the very beginning. We had a couple fellows hired to do that. The show was maybe 5 or 6 weeks old when Jim drove stunts.
guess the truck jump was pretty popular.
Oh yeah, it was spectacular.
And there's another picture here. It says JoJo's head-on crash.
Yeah, well, they would run one sometimes.
Were motorcycles part of all the shows?
They were part of Teeter's show, and they were also part of Lynch's for quite a while. All they did was jump over a car or truck or something and do a board wall.
When they would